Good morning. I welcome you all to this session. I'm Subiksha Bhaskaran, a product marketer from Zoho Books team. It's my pleasure to introduce you CA Pritam Mahure, a distinguished chartered accountant and one of India's leading digital experts in GST and indirect taxation. With over 15 years of experience, CA Pritam has advised a diverse range of industries, helping businesses navigate the complexities of taxation in today's dynamic regulatory environment. He is also a prolific speaker, writer, frequently contributing his insight to major tax journals and conferences across the country. We are happy to have him here with us today. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, madam. And thanks, Team Zoho, for this wonderful opportunity given to us to share our views on this new interesting development which is taking place, that is Invoice Management System. I think all the participants will recall that since the day GST has been introduced in India, to some extent, not only it is a tax change, but also parallelly it is a big technology change, because anything and everything which we are seeing in GST over the last couple of years, you'll be able to understand there is some technical backbone which keeps us on the forefront of change, I would say. When GST was introduced, the participants will recall that initially it was basically, we were told that there would be a system called a GSTR1, then there would be a 1A, then there would be a 2, 2A, 3, 3B. So all these systems were put in place. And in those systems, if you recall, there was a concept of accepting and rejecting the invoices. Even in between 2019 or so, there was discussion regarding a new return system. And in that new return system also, there was a discussion regarding this invoice being accepted and rejected by the recipient. To some extent, the same changes which were proposed earlier are now being introduced through a new system called as Invoice Management System. So I think this is, one can say always that it's old wine in new bottle in the name of Invoice Management System. Additionally, as I mentioned, that almost all the changes which are taking place in GST, they revolve around the GST portal, because you would have seen that initially when GSTR1 and 3B was being filed in 2017-18, subsequently the government said that we need to report even the movement of our goods which is taking place across India. So the government brought in the concept of e-way bill. After that, the government did not, like the government never said that we will say, okay, this is the final system. They said, let's improvise on this system further. Because as a taxpayer, we were reporting invoices on a monthly basis. So for the month of January, if from 1st of January to 31st of January, if we are preparing invoices, all of you know that we need to file GSTR1 on 11th of the subsequent month. So after 11 days, effectively the government was getting the data. So it was, you can say, a lag of around 40 to 41 days for understanding for the government as to how many invoices you have raised. But the government said we can't wait for that long. And the government brought in the concept of e-invoicing from 2020. And in a phase-wise manner, the government introduced that concept right from 500 crore. Now the e-invoicing limit, all of you know, is only 5 crore rupees. So slowly, almost all the businesses, in our view, would be covered under the ambit of e-invoicing also. So we have the concept of GSTR1, 3B, which are the monthly return. But then parallelly, on a real-time basis, we are supposed to report all the movement of goods through e-way bill. And now, as I mentioned, if your turnover is above 5 crore, we are also supposed to raise e-invoices. Now, if you really look at all these changes, and if you really try to understand what is undergoing change, you'll be able to understand that the government is trying to find the pulse of the business. The government is trying to understand the pulse of the business. Now, you will say, what is the pulse of the business? If you really look at any business which is taking place in India, you will be surprised to know that the pulse of the business is basically their invoices. Because what is a business? What a businessman does, what any company will do, typically they will generate or they will sell certain goods or services. So they will generate their sale invoices, and the taxpayer would be purchasing something, procuring something. So they will be buying something. So they will be getting their inward supply of invoices. So business is effectively nothing but outward supply of invoices and inward supply of invoices. That is what the business is. And it is as good as a pulse of a business. This is what the government is trying to understand in a detailed nitty-gritty basis. And that's the reason you will be able to understand, friends, everything in GST revolves around invoices. Input, the outward supply which you are reporting to the government is at the invoice level. Unlike good old days, because if you really look at the excise era, if you really look at service tax era, if you really look at the VAT era, in those good old days, the supply, the turnover, the outward reporting was on a gross level basis. As to what is your turnover, you just need to punch in one figure in excise return, in service tax return. But now the reporting is brought down to the invoice level. That is on the sales side. Even on the purchase side, because you are buying from somebody who is registered for GST purposes, even he is reporting on invoice level basis. And that is what is the pulse of the business. The government is on a real-time basis trying to understand what you are selling and what you are buying. But all of you know that is not right now enough. And that's the reason the government is saying that we need to now bring in a concept of invoice management system. And why this is not enough? Because all of you know right now as a taxpayer, while your purchase side data, that is GST or 2A to B, though it is visibly on an invoice level, what as a taxpayer we are doing, we are claiming one gross level number. We are mentioning one major, one bigger number in the GST R3B. We are mentioning one single number in the GST R3B. For example, if you look at your purchase side data, that is GST R1 data, you'll be, that is the supplier's GST R1, which becomes your 2A or 2B. If you look at your 2A or 2B as a recipient, you'll be able to understand that I have 100 rupees credit. But when you are claiming that credit in 3B, what we are doing, we are mentioning either 80 as credit or might be, let us say, for some reason 120 rupees. Typically, it has to be lower, but let us say 120. So there can be a difference in such cases. And this is a mismatch which is taking place. Because if as per 2B, your credit is 100, can you really claim 80 or 120 in your 3B? There might be some valid reasons also for that. But system doesn't understand all this. And that's the reason you'll be able to understand that numerous notices are being issued to the taxpayer. And these are system generated notices. The government wanted to address this major issue of mismatches and the system generated notices. And that's the reason the government said, okay, what should we do? How should we tackle this issue? And that's the reason they said, let us now request the taxpayer to follow a system called as Invoice Management System, wherein the taxpayer would be in a position to accept the invoices and claim the credit. So that whatever he is accepting, if that is being claimed in the GST 3B also, then automatically this 2B versus 3B mismatch could be addressed to some extent. I'm not saying it will be completely addressed, but to some extent. And this is said to be one of the major reasons for this bigger change which is taking place in the name of IMS. Friends, the first question which will come to your mind would be, from which date this change is applicable? Please note that the system will start working from 1st of October 2024. But as a recipient, as a taxpayer, you will be able to see the changes. You will be able to accept, reject the invoices from 14th of October 2024. So this is a new date which you need to keep in mind. Please note that once this system start, that is IMS system start, the changes, the amendments, the process, the IMS system will be applicable till eternity. That is, whenever you would have seen any system which the government has introduced, once they introduce this system, it has never ever been seen that they withdraw this system. Because look at e-way bill. E-way bill were introduced. Look at e-invoicing is what introduced. And now it will last till eternity. The e-way bill or e-invoicing will never ever, like say, is unlikely to be removed. Though, if some of you would have tracked e-invoicing very closely, in the initial discussion, there was a specific mention that if e-invoicing is applicable, e-way bill may not be applicable. But as I mentioned, typically whenever any system is introduced, that lasts till eternity, that is typically never removed. And that's the reason we believe it is more likely that even the IMS system which would be introduced, which would be seen from 14th of October 2024, will also be continued till eternity. Now, what is IMS, which we are discussing about? As I mentioned, it is Invoice Management System. And in this Invoice Management System, as a taxpayer, on the government portal, on the dashboard of IMS, you would be, as a taxpayer, in a position to accept the invoices which have been shared with you by your suppliers. You will be in a position to reject those invoices. You will be in a position to keep those invoices pending. And why this facility has been introduced? As I mentioned, this has been introduced to reduce the errors and improve the reconciliations, because you should be in a position to only claim credit which has been accepted by you on the government portal. So automatically the reconciliations will go down dramatically. Friends, please note, it has been mentioned in the press release dated 9th September 2024 that this is an optional facility. This is an optional facility. This is not a mandatory facility. Though when it comes to credit note and all, if my supplier is issuing a credit note, it, in our view, might, like say, it has to be either accepted or rejected by me. So can it be really said to be optional facility? And once everybody starts using it, can, as a taxpayer, I remain out of it, saying that it's an optional facility? To my mind, that is not a question at all. And also, all of you know, even if it is said that it is optional facility in the month of October 2024, it is likely similar to e-invoicing. It will be made applicable to almost all the taxpayers in day to come. So what we are supposed to do in this facility, or that is IMS, as a taxpayer on the government portal, on the GST Invoice Management System, we are supposed to either accept the invoices which have been issued by my supplier. I am supposed to reject invoices which do not belong to me. Some XYZ person has issued an invoice to Pritam Mahure, which even I don't know that person also. So I can reject that invoice, saying that this is not at all my invoice. I can keep certain invoices pending. And then finally, I can also decide not to take action. But there is one interesting information with respect to not taking any action. And that is, when you don't take any action, that is as good as taking action. And we will be discussing about that, but in the next couple of slides. Friends, what you are supposed to do as a supplier and as a recipient, as I mentioned, you are supposed to either take action as a recipient to either accept, reject, or keep pending. And whatever action you take as a recipient, that would also be visible to your supplier. Now, what happens? Let us understand what happens once you accept the invoices. Please note, only invoices which are accepted becomes part of your to be. That is the biggest important thing which you need to understand. If you reject, they don't become part of your to be. And that's the reason which invoices you are going to accept. That is a very critical point which you need to keep in mind. So let us understand one by one all these actions and what implications they are going to have in your GSTR 1 and 3B. As I mentioned, 4 actions: accept, reject, pending, and no action. Let us start with the accept concept. When it comes to accept, please note, whatever invoices you accept, those invoices will become part of input tax credit available section of GSTR 2B. And they will be populated in GSTR 3B as your eligible ITC. So whatever you accept would be moving here as a part of ITC available. Now, what if you don't take any action? Because you might say this is too complicated for me to understand. Accept, reject, keep pending. Plus, as a taxpayer, you might be having maybe 30,000 invoices. So it is not possible for you to do all these things from 14th of October till 18th or 19th of October, because anyways you need to file your 3B also. If you don't accept, reject, and all those chattery, you will not be in a position to file your 3B also. So you say, I can't do any of these things. It is not possible for me. So if you don't take any action whatsoever, then please note, as I mentioned, no action is considered to be deemed accepted. Whatever right now, whatever deemed invoices which are deemed to be accepted by you, all those deemed accepted invoices will move to your 2B. Right now also exactly this is happening. So in the month of September, on 14th of September, when GSTR 2B was generated, in that time, it was accepted, it was deemed to be accepted, it was deemed to be considered that all these invoices belong to you. And that is exactly what is going to happen if you don't accept any invoices at all. That means if you don't take any action, it will be deemed accepted by you and your GSTN will be auto-populated. Now, even after auto-population, you would be in a position to take exactly same steps which you were taking in the previous couple of months. So please note, if you are not very familiar, if you believe with the IMS system, or if you believe that there are thousands or lakhs of invoices which as a taxpayer you are getting, then right now, before you understand this entire system, for 1 month or so, you can use this concept of deemed acceptance. So you don't have to go through each and every invoices and then accept those invoices manually or maybe by selecting all. So you can spare that kind of a work. We can remove that work right now. But maybe in months to come, if your management says that please check which are the invoices which belong to our organization and only claim credit with respect to those invoices. Because if some ABC person is issuing invoices to you and you don't even know that supplier, and because only it is appearing in to be, you are claiming the credit, then it is fundamentally incorrect. So if these kind of supplies are appearing in your to be, then certainly as a prudent taxpayer, you might decide to reject those invoices because those invoices do not belong to you. So as I mentioned, maybe right now, in a couple of months, you might decide that, okay, let me move ahead with the deemed accepted concept. But maybe in months to come, you may have to take actions on individual invoices by looking at the invoices, whether those invoices belong to me or not. You obviously would be in a position to use some system related support also. Friends, as I mentioned, no action means action that is deemed accepted. Now, what will happen to the accepted and rejected records? Because you might reject certain records also. So what will happen to those? The invoices which are accepted and rejected will move out of the IMS after filing of 3B. So basically, whatever is accepted by you will become part of your to be. What is rejected by you will not become part of your to be. It is as simple as that. Now, there might be certain invoices which you may say that I want to keep those invoices as pending. Now, if you keep those invoices as pending, then what will happen? If you keep those invoices as pending, then those invoices will move to the next month in the IMS dashboard or portal, so that in the next month you can either accept or reject those invoices. Once you accept or reject the invoices in a particular month, they will directly move to your to be. If you accept, if you reject, they are out of the IMS system. If you keep pending, then only in the next month in the IMS system you will be able to see those invoices. Otherwise, from the IMS portal, from the IMS dashboard, those invoices would be automatically removed. Friends, please note that to either accept, if you do keep certain invoices pending, please know that to do that, to accept those invoices, you need to ensure that the time limit of section 16.4 you need to follow. You cannot claim credit beyond section 16.4 time limit. All of you know that the time limit to claim credit is up to 30th of November. So let me give you an example. So let us say there is one invoice of October 2024 and you keep that invoice pending. You are not claiming credit. Now, because it is belonging to the financial year 2024-2025, you can claim the credit of that invoice up to 30th of November 2025. You cannot accept it after that. So that means there is a section 16.4 time limit which will be applicable here. And because of that, you will not be in a position to claim that credit if you cross that line of 30th of November 2025, if you cross that date. So you need to be very careful when you are keeping certain things pending at the IMS dashboard. Friends, please note that there might be certain scenarios wherein this pending action will not be made available. This will not be applicable to certain documents. And which are those documents or which are those things? One, original credit note which has been issued, you will have to either accept or reject it. Upward amendment in credit note. Similarly, download amendment if original credit note was rejected. And third is basic. Fourth is downloading of invoice or debit note where original invoice was accepted or and the respective 3B was filed. So in these 4 instances, you will not be in a position to keep these invoices or these documents pending. Friends, the first question which will come to your mind would be, when can I accept, when can I reject, when can I take those actions? Right now, the IMS dashboard would be available to you from 14th of October. But maybe from 14th, or maybe from the 1st of November, or maybe in months to come, you as a taxpayer would be in a position to take action on the invoices, that is accept, reject, and keep pending once those invoices are saved by the supplier. Because on a daily basis, the supplier might save the invoices on the GST portal. Now, once those invoices are saved, and if they are being seen by you on your portal, then you can accept, you can reject, or you can keep those invoices pending once these are saved. All of you know these invoices which are saved for the month of, let us say, November, then the supplier who is supplying goods or services to you would also be filing a GSTR1 on 11th of the subsequent month. Now, once he is filing the GSTR1, then if there is any change in the invoice between the saved invoice and the return when he is filing in the GSTR1, if there is any change in the invoice amount or something, then that new amended invoice which he is putting in the GSTR1 would be considered to be a revised data that will override the earlier saved data. So it will become very difficult again for the taxpayer, I would say, that if I am looking at the saved data, and if subsequently my supplier makes certain changes in that saved data when he is filing a GSTR1, if I have already accepted the saved data, and then if in the GSTR1, while filing GSTR1, if he makes any changes, then certainly I will have to again go back and look at that amended invoice and again take action. So this is again a very critical thing which you need to keep in mind, that it would be, or it could be better for you to take action only after GSTR1 has been filed by your respective suppliers. Because as I mentioned, whatever has been saved by the supplier could be they can change, make the changes and override the saved data also. Friends, typically the time limit for doing all this activity or action for you is of 50 days. How come 50 days? Let us say on 1st of December, your supplier saves invoice. Now you can start on the IMS dashboard making the changes. Then subsequently on 11th of January, because we are talking about December month. So on 11th of January, he will file a GSTR1. Now, again, if he is keeping the same thing, no problem. If you make changes, you can again have a look at it, all those changes on between this 11 to 14, and you can again take respective action. And finally, when you are filing your GSTR 3B, now if you say you are accepting the invoice, you say accepting the invoice, now accepted invoice will appear in your 2B. Now when you are filing 3B, that time again you can decide not to claim credit. So in our view, you will be having around 50 days in your hand practically. If you start doing changes, accepting, rejecting, keeping those invoices pending, if you start that activity on 1st of the month, so effectively you will be having 50 days. But as I mentioned, the window might be as short as just 2 to 3 days, because on 11th your supplier would be filing his final GSTR1, and after that, before your 3B is generated on 14th, so you might be having only 3 days also. So we'll have to see what date you would like to consider as a time limit for claiming or doing all these activity, whether it is 3 days or whether it is 50 days. This we already discussed. This also we already discussed. As I mentioned, if the supplier is amending the saved invoices, then the recipient will be able to see the amended invoice, not the earlier one, the invoice which he had saved. Who can see the data? Friends, please note, all the action which has been taken by the recipient would be visible to the supplier also. So if my supplier is giving invoice to me of say 10,000 rupees plus GST. If I reject that invoice, the supplier would be able to know that Pritam has rejected his invoice. Or if Pritam accepts that invoice, then supplier would be in a position to know that Pritam has accepted the invoice. So now I would be saying that there would be a two-way control between a particular business transaction. That when a supplier is issuing an invoice, and if that invoice is accepted by the recipient, even commercially, the supplier can take a position saying that because the recipient has accepted my invoice, tomorrow, if recipient is not ready to make payment of the invoice, he can drag even the recipient to the court based on the GST portal data, saying, look at the action of the recipient. He accepted my invoice on the GST portal also. So this is one interesting dimension. I think all of us would be able to see in days to come based on the GST portal data, because once the recipient is accepting the invoice, will it also mean that commercially is accepting that he has received or he or she has received the goods as well as services from that particular supplier? Because as a recipient, once I say I am accepting this invoice, I am claiming credit. Tomorrow, if as a recipient I don't make payment to the supplier, whether the supplier can drag the recipient to the court based on even the actions which he is taking in the IMS is some interesting aspect which all of us need to see in days to come. Friends, many small taxpayers might have opted for QRMP, quarterly return and monthly payment system. So herein, what will happen? Let us understand. In case of QRMP supplier, he is supposed to file, go with IFF system, wherein he is reporting the invoices on a monthly basis. But please note, whenever IFF system is being used, the recipient GSTR would be appearing on a monthly basis only. But if you are a QRMP, correct, your GSTR would be appearing, or it would be visible to you on a quarterly basis only. So this is one important thing which you need to keep in mind as a QRMP recipient. I don't think so most of you belong to QRMP. Even as a tax professional, if you really ask whether somebody should opt for QRMP or not, as a professional, a strong recommendation is go or file your returns as a normal taxpayer on a monthly basis, not as a QRMP supplier. Because what happens as a QRMP, you are anyway supposed to report your invoices on a monthly basis. You are anyway supposed to make payment of taxes, that partial tax payment on a monthly basis. Only return filing is pushed to the quarter. But the invoice activity, anyways, you are doing. So in the third month, instead of doing 3-month reconciliation, that is one time. But again, you would be supposed to look at the data of April, May, if you are talking about a July QRMP return. April, May, June, anyways, you have to see it once, correct? So it is much better that we should go for a monthly, we should opt for a monthly return filing system instead of a quarterly. What will not go to IMS? Friends, please note, your RCM supplies, your even import data will not go to IMS. That is not to be accepted, rejected, or kept pending. The reason is import data anyways is auto-populated. It comes from IceGate. It's a separate system of customs. Inward RCM supplies, because you are yourself reporting that. So naturally, there is no need again to accept, reject, because you yourself are showing that these are my self-generated invoices. So in such cases, these RCM invoices, import data will not go to IMS. Additionally, if the invoice on which input tax credit needs to be claimed, if that invoice is beyond the time limit of section 16.4, that is 30th of November of the subsequent year, then again that or those invoices will not be moving to IMS. So that means you will not be in a position to claim that credit. It will be lost forever. Additionally, POS based provisions, all of you know, restrict input claim of a taxpayer. So if I am only registered in Maharashtra, but if I go and do or attend a business meeting in Goa, in that case, if I'm doing that, then naturally I will not be in a position to claim credit of CGST and HGST, which has been charged by, say, let us say, some hotel in Goa. And that's the reason this POS, that is place of supply related restriction, would be trigger or would be applicable here. And as a recipient, you will not be able to see those invoices in the IMS system. Friends, please note that whenever original credit note is rejected by the recipient, it will lead to increase in liability of the supplier. And similarly, in many other ways, also supplier liability could be increased, which we have mentioned in the slide. Friends, with this, we are almost through with the discussion on IMS. Friends, IMS being a system-driven mechanism, which or a facility, naturally in days to come, you will be able to see that there are a couple of changes which would be proposed by GSTN on a real-time basis. Additionally, GSTN has already issued revised FAQs also on the IMS, which you can track, and we can also share a separate link on the same. Now, if there is any specific question on IMS, we can take those questions.
I hope the session was very helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today.